Good evening, you're listening to Movie Watch Live with me, Pete Mack, and my two guests, Carl Hungus and Aldous Huxley. Tonight, we're going to be watching a retro classic sci-fi fantasy film called KRULL, and if you want to get that on whichever source you're looking for and be ready to start the movie. Just before we start, I'm going to introduce my guests. So, good evening, Carl.
Good evening, Pete. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the invite, and I'm looking forward to this one. A little bit more lucid than last weekend, and so we'll have some good analysis here.
Cool. And Aldous, are you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, I am. This is it's kind of a cult classic that I've always appreciated, and in kind of the week leading up to watching this, I dug up a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, and in rewatching it, caught a whole lot of cool symbolism that we can chat about.
Yeah, cool. Right, so without further ado, we'll get the film started. So I'm just going to say go after a count of three. And on the count of go, if you're just ready to start your movie at that point. So 3, 2, 1, go.
All right.
So here's the Columbia Pictures Lady with the Torch. And that score by James Horner is probably one of the best things about this movie, and the thing that everybody remembers.
Well, this is 1983, so Horner's coming off of his huge hit with Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of that. You can kind of catch it in the background of that.
Hey, so what's his thing? I'm sorry. He did the score to both of those?
Yeah.
Because you can hear, I mean, if you listen to the soundtrack of Wrath of Khan, it's pretty horn heavy. In a lot of places, you can hear it in this opening music.
Yeah. And Carl, do you recognize that weapon that's just come up on the screen?
Well, to be completely honest with you, I fucked up already and I'm out of place. So.
Oh, that's all right. We're about
2 seconds into it, brother. I go to move my mouse, right, and I've got a gaming mouse. I actually hit one of the buttons and it shot me forward an hour.
That's all right. All right. Well,
I'm at 125.
Yeah.
125.
Yeah.
All right, I'm a little bit behind here.
Yeah.
I can't even tell where I'm at.
I'm just seeing
Francesca
Annis's name.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I've seen Francesca Annis's name, and now I'm seeing the spaceship coming towards the middle of the screen.
Good. I'm approximately where you're at.
Yeah. Who'll catch up more?
Spaceship, huh? Looks like an asteroid. Well, yeah, that's one of the things they're saying. If you kind of keep up with, like, when they're talking about human exploration of space, is one of the things they're talking about is just attaching rockets to asteroids and going from there.
It's a good point. Can you see the twin suns?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to say this now. This sort of hints to the producer, Ron Silverman's attempt to try and replicate, or at least compete, with Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a little Tatooine-ish, huh?
Yeah. And that's not the first thing you'll see which is trying to tie it in with Star Wars, or rather replicate Star Wars.
Right, and if you keep in the concept of duality, the twin suns, as you're watching this, just look out for pairings, look out for things that mirror each other, both in physical and theme. And there's a lot of it throughout the film. Here's Nick Maley coming off of Return of the Jedi as the special effects guy. James Horner, obviously, we already mentioned him.
Peter Yates, what else did he do?
Yates,
director.
Yeah, just looking at the note. Yeah.
Bullet is probably his most famous.
That was it. And I think as well, there was. We'll cover later on some of the issues that the filmmakers had, and there was a bit of a disappointment with Yates because there was great expectations because of his work on Bullet, and we can cover a little bit about some of the issues Yates had later on in the film. But he was an established director. So I've just got the bit where the castle, the spaceship, has landed on the planet.
Yeah, I just landed.
Yeah.
Now we're getting a close up of this place, and there's creepy
Yeah.
people with candles coming out. Are you there, or am I too far ahead?
No, that's fine. I think you're only a few seconds from me. Freddie Jones is reading the, I suppose, a prologue. The thing about this movie is it could have really had a proper prologue done at the start, which might have helped explain some of the plot.
Right.
So you've got this miniature prologue here. And this is where his character explains why the beast is here, because the child, the offspring of this royal couple, the prince and princess, will rule the galaxy. So obviously he wants to usurp that.
He wants to cuck him.
Yeah, so he wants to invade and take the princess and take that power for himself. So, what do you think of this armor, Carl?
It's pretty cool. I mean, all right. So we got to. There's a difference here because from other movies, because this is like a mishmash. It's kind of like sci-fi and quasi-historical. But I mean, they're wearing like plate armor and stuff, which would be pretty common, 1400s, late 1300s, into the 1500s. There's not a whole lot right now that I can truly pick up on. I gotta get it on this thing through, but let's see. They're riding their horses down the hill. They're riding everywhere.
Yeah, there's a bit more traditional sort of armor and arms. The prince is wearing here and everything.
Right. Yeah, he's kind of got that, like, it looks like a purple leather sort of jacket on over his stuff. It looks all right. It's cool. Yeah. Hey, his haircut's kind of weird, but it's the 80s, man.
There's another Star Wars.
You can really hear it in the music, dude.
Yeah. The actors on this film are all British actors, apart from the lead role, played by Ken Marshall, who plays Colwyn. Now, the princess is played by Lisette Anthony, who was quite well known over here in the UK at the time in the 80s. She appeared in pop videos and loads of different things. Now, she one of the producers, it might have even been Ron Silverman, had the interesting idea that if she had a British accent, the American audience wouldn't like that. So they decided to dub over her voice with an actress in her 40s, Lindsay Krause. So this young woman, if you notice, if you look closely, the lip sync is slightly out, and of course she sounds like an older woman.
Right.
But it's because if you listen to Lindsay Krause's voice, I think it's because they're trying to go for that Princess Leia thing. And of course, this film came out. What was it, Aldous? How soon was this connected to Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was the same week or the following week, but I mean, it was a massive studio disappointment because it was so close and they had so much competition with films that were much more well polished.
Yeah, right. So it really suffered from that. I mean, it wasn't just Return of the Jedi. You had Octopussy out around that time as well, and Superman 3. But I think the studio producers seriously were thinking about trying to produce something that would replicate Star Wars, and this is their attempt at that. But it was what we'll cover a little bit later was how last minute some of the work was with something Carl Aldous pointed out, which was that it's a top-down production, which led to a lot of disorganization, which meant that ultimately it was late coming out, and Return of the Jedi had already come out, and it suffered greatly because of that.
All right, so here's the thing that's bugging me already with like some of the outfits and armor and stuff they're wearing. whenever you see a guy in leather armor, like whether you're watching like Game of Thrones and Jon Snow walking around in leather armor, just realize leather armor is utter crap. It is not necessarily historical, never was used, because armor is just skin, and swords and axes cut skin pretty damn well.
Yeah.
Now, often what they would do is they'd put plates underneath the armor, steel plates that would be riveted on, and that was what was called a brigandine.
Yeah.
And that was really common in the late from 1350 or so to the mid 1400s. It was pretty effective, but that's not what I'm seeing here. But
one thing to remember too is when, as Pete mentioned, this was a top-down production, and they were told to make a Star Wars clone, if you will, and it started off very sci-fi heavy, and the longer the production went on, the more fantasy medieval it became.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, as you're watching, especially this first portion of the movie here, with we had the Beast ship come in. It's very sci-fi, and that tends to taper down as the movie goes in. So just kind of watch that through the sequence.
So one thing that, from a costuming point of view, just to finish off the leather armor thing, it is cheap and it does look cool. So I mean, very good reasons to use it and utilize it in your movies. But I'm sorry.
So here's the Slayers coming. Aldous, you found out something about the whole design of that area of the film. Is that right? I think he's muted himself.
Must have lost Aldous, or he's getting somebody. Are they getting married here? Is this their wedding?
Well, it's a royal wedding. Here we see the character of Ynea. I had to practice that pronunciation because it's it's not a very normal word. Ynyr. This is played by Freddie Jones, and so the Slayers, which are the troops of the Beast, are on their way to the castle to stop the ceremony. And again, we've got this sort of Star Wars-esque armor of the knights here.
Now, even though that's not like a historical thing, that does look pretty freaking cool. I kind of like it.
It does look good.
The guys that are in Burgundy too, if you've ever seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, they show up when they're on the back of the movie lot, riding around on the bike. There's two of the guys in the Burgundy armor that show up.
And you can see the symbol of the glaive, not the glove, the glaive in the background there.
Not the glove.
Not the glove. And that was another thing. They tried to market the weapon as a toy. So there was a lot of
I've got a few things to say about that when he actually gets that thing.
Yeah. And so this is the idea that in their world, magic is normal. The princess has the power of fire, and she wants to give it to the prince Colwyn, but doesn't get a chance. They're here we go. Here's the Slayers. The Slayers have come to cook them.
It's shit like this that's why they had best men and groomsmen back in the Middle Ages. If someone tries to mess with your wedding, your boys are supposed to get in there. That's where that whole tradition comes from.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
So one of the now that we've seen the Slayers and they're riding into the castle, this is probably a good point to mention this, Pete. So Nick Maley was in charge of the special effects, and his budget and time crunch was under a budget and a time crunch. He was told by the production staff he wouldn't have to worry about designing the Slayer outfits, and then 10 days before filming was told, nope, the prop guys can't do it. We need you to make the Slayer outfits. So in 10 days, working double shifts, his guys came up with these, and they only were able to make 40 suits, and not all of them were complete. So you'll see the same suits repeated, that they've just shot them in such a way so that it looks like there's a lot, but there's actually not.
The magic of Hollywood right there. Whoa, that could just fell into pieces.
Yeah. You can see as well that, the performance of the Slayers, they're using these laser weapons. They would be totally unstoppable. I mean, there would be no way anyone could ever stand against them. But then they start using weapons, and they're basically like statuesque street performers at the in which they go. It's like, oh, there you go.
Yep, there we have
another influence.
You might see them in Times Square or or in Piccadilly Circus or something.
Yeah, well, you can defeat them with tablecloths. There you go.
Oh, dude, spike to the neck.
This guy's visor for this armor when it's down, it makes him look like a bit like a duck.
Yeah.
But you might have noticed when you kill a Slayer, they sort of come out of the armor, the bit in the head, and it's a bit like Alien.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like I say, they're trying to just say, right, okay, that was a successful movie. Let's get a bit of that, and that was a successful movie. Let's get a bit of that. And we're going to hit the mark somewhere, you know.
Is that the old dude fighting with the dagger and sword? That's the hero's father.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. The
like
actors in this, like I was saying, Lisette Anthony is English as well. So all of these actors, apart from the lead role of Ken Marshall, are English actors. Some of them were RSC trained, which is why the film still carries, because that's one of the reasons the film is still watchable, because the actors' performances is really good.
Oh, Dad just got it.
Yeah, we also have the kind of the Errol Flynn moment where he's swinging on the rope across the. I mean, there's a lot of little harken backs to a lot of your standards sword and swashbuckle type historical or not classic movies.
Yeah, I mean, Ken Marshall did a lot of training for this movie. He was quite accomplished. He was quite athletic. He put his heart and soul in doing as good a job as he could. It's a shame that because the film, you know, the things we might touch on later, and the timing of when the film came out, it bombed at the box office. So
look at the torches in the background. They're in twos, kind of like the sun.
Yeah, so you got a bit of the duality theme there as well. So yeah, I mean, that's just to keep Colwyn warm overnight. That little fire, they're quite considerate, aren't they? So there you go.
Catch a cold.
Yeah, I'll just there you are. But because this film, you know, didn't do great at the box office, it lost a lot of money. I think that might have affected Ken Marshall's career, because he didn't get any work for about 4 years afterwards. So there's 40 suits. Is that right, Aldous? 40 Slayer suits. Because we're seeing, I don't know how they're doing this shot, because we're seeing, I think we're seeing more than 40 here. So there must be people in the background just dressed in black. As Carl said, camera trickery.
Yeah, that's what it is. Ooh, look at that, bodies right there. Now those swords are kind of cool because those actually look like, 15th century long swords. I like them. Yeah, I don't know about the spandex and plastic, but those guys are dead. They're not going to worry about it anymore.
So I've reached the scene where Ynea, the sage character, has just turned up at the castle. Is that where you two are now?
Yeah, I'm right where he's like putting some salve on his wound or something.
Yeah.
Or about to.
Yeah.
There he goes. He's touched it to his flesh.
Yeah. Peanut butter.
Peanut butter. That's going to get stuck in the hair on his chest. Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we generally comment on the actresses as well. She was looking pretty 80s-rific, pretty good though. Like the big puffy curly 80s red hair.
Yeah, she's really like symbolic of that kind of look. She was referred to as the face of the 80s, and sometimes because she was in a lot of well-known pop videos and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, so it would have been good if they could have just kept her original voice. I think that would have been a plus for the movie.
As an American, I would not have cared if she spoke in British.
Well, the irony is today, Star Wars only uses British brunette actresses.
Right.
So, but I think George Lucas was originally looking for a British actress to play Princess Leia originally, which is why Carrie Fisher practiced that accent in the first place, because she had sort of a, you know, a semi-British accent in the character.
That's right. Yeah, you can hear that in her voice when she's talking. So now, you know, come on, get up off the ground. You've got things to do. You have a kingdom to rule. And,
is it
so?
If Colwyn is the Luke Skywalker character here, then Ynea is the Obi-Wan, and there's a lot of similarity between, you know, the way Obi-Wan finds Luke in the desert and brings him back to health, and what Ynea is doing here.
Slayers are kind of like the sand people of the stormtroopers.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of strong similarities between the two films, and this is where Ynea tells Colwyn about what he needs to do and where he needs to go to find the weapon, etc.
Right.
Well, this is also now we talked about I'm sorry, I just had to step later from it.
That's right.
Talk about the hero's journey at all to this point?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Corwin, the hero, has been introduced. He's been isolated. His father's now dead. He's got his damseling going on. Lyssa, his engaged betrothed, has been captured and imprisoned by the evil bad guy. And now we have been introduced to his mentor, this Ynea character, played by Freddie Jones. So as we move forward, keep in mind the hero's journey, because now we're well into it. We're in the beginning arc here as we go and try to fletch the weapon.
Yeah. The scenery here as well, I think, from what I've read, most of it was done on giant sound stages, but this is I believe somewhere in Italy. So I think this is the same area as well where they later filmed the scene with the horses. But fantastic scenery around here. I don't know whether it's the Alps. It doesn't say in the research I've looked at.
Right. So those right there, those are the original soy pants, those stripy ass pants. The original soy pants.
Yeah. I think they're trying to hearken to the Renaissance era, you know, like.
If you go back and watch like the Romeo and Juliet from the 1960s, they're all in like these stripy, crazy pants and shit. Yeah. I got you. Yeah, that does look like northern.
I think it must be the Alps, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Somewhere there. Okay, so this is the super long climbing scene where it's practically in real time. The hero climbs.
Yes.
So you climb a cliff to get to the cleft in the cliff, and inside the cleft's a cave. Inside the cave is the glaive.
And of course, the compulsory rock slide.
Yeah, random, not caused by anybody rock slide. Watch out!
Well, and it's very important too that this whole time they've known where it is.
Yeah,
they've known how to get there.
Yeah,
but nobody up until now has gone, you know what? Let's go get it.
You think you'd want to do that thing when you don't need it, so you had it when you did.
Right.
So here's a question. When I remember watching the film, I thought, how can he put his hand into the molten wallpaper paste or porridge oats or whatever and not get his hand burnt off? And I was thinking, it's because he's got the power of flame from...
but he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. From this point, so he hasn't got the power of flame from Lyssa. So what happened there?
Well, I think that's just another example of the chosen trope. He's been chosen for this. He's the only one that can reach into it.
Yeah.
He is the one that's destined. So it's akin to Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. How can this kid do it versus everybody else?
Yeah, and again, that's another big thing. The Excalibur references, because this came out 2 years after Excalibur, and that was a big influence on the producers as well.
You were not lying. This is in real time. He's climbing this fucking mountain.
It is. The scenery is phenomenal. It's beautiful.
This is the Alps. That is for sure the Alps, though.
Yeah.
This is a good example of just it. of how what happens when you do a top-down film, right? I mean, the story did not take precedence. It was, we're going to do this and have an adventure sequence where they're climbing in a mountain. Well, okay, we'll write this in. You can take this and cut it in half, and it still works.
Yeah.
The person I feel for in this situation is the music composer, because he's got to compose something to make this exciting.
And he does a fantastic job. I mean,
he does. It's stirring.
Retrospectively, I mean, James Horner considers this probably in the top 5 of his work, this score. So here we go, into the cave. And there's also echoes of Dragon Slayer here as well. You know?
Sure. Empire Strikes Back, the whole deal.
Yeah.
Well, the movie was originally going to be called Dragons of KRULL, and because of the failure of Dragon Slayer at the box office, they changed it to just KRULL, and they did some other modifications that we can talk about later. But that is Excalibur, Star Wars, Dragon Slayer. All these themes played into this film. It was very much. It wasn't its own unique production. It was a response to everything else, and it. As you're watching, you can see that begin to play out the more the movie goes.
All right.
Here's the starfish, the magical starfish.
All right, looks like he's about to reach for it.
I heard something about
it's important to roll your sleeve up too, because
you don't want to burn your sleeve.
Right, your flesh is fine, but
shirt. Rolled up very far. He's only expecting to go an inch higher than his sleeve was at.
Yeah.
And the chosen one. There we go.
Aldous, do you know the story behind how they got this thing to work? How they got the blades to come out?
Yeah, it's they were held in place by a bunch of rubber bands, if I remember correctly.
There you go, the high tech solution.
Because they couldn't figure out how they could get the blades to come out, so they ended up holding them into place with rubber bands. And when he activates it, it cuts the band.
Yeah. This
fucking thing. I hate this weapon. This is not a real weapon. All right. First of all, let's start with the name. They call it a glaive. A glaive is not a throwing thing. It's basically a French pole arm,
right?
With a big old, it's like a big old butcher cleaver axe head with a spike on the back of it. So that's what a glaive is. But we'll go with their nomenclature here.
It does look cool.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's like a mix between like a ninja star and a chakram, an Indian chakram. The way they use it.
Okay, this we've got, as you're coming up on the eye, and this is inside the beast layer. This is a reoccurring motif that occurs throughout this movie with an eye.
Right,
and it's something to.
I'm sorry, I finished. I was just gonna say this is like one of the most iconic shots in the whole movie. I remember this from 30 years ago when I watched this movie last.
Yeah.
And here's the terrible beast, and the beast was Nick Maley said it was the most complex special effects operation he had done up to this point in his career.
Right. So we get a sneak peek of that, and now we're straight back to Coleman again. Right. I mean, the thing about this weapon, they're obviously trying to back to the Arthur theme, and this is supposed to be their version of Excalibur. You know, the way...
Right, so you just had the Corwin, Luke, Arthur character just received Excalibur, the lightsaber, the glaive.
Yeah, exactly. and as far as like understanding how stories are retold, this movie is actually a really good example of that, because the movie, the principle behind this movie is they're trying to retell established stories that were actually, unfortunately, contemporary. So it's, they're trying to reinvent the wheel in a way, but nevertheless, it's something about the way it was made still worked, and it remains a very well followed film, very much admired by its cult following.
Yeah, they don't have to make Citizen Kane here; they just got to make something entertaining, and so far, it's doing its job.
It does, yeah. Despite all the difficulties, it's actually an entertaining movie.